Every Christmas day, Chief Uche distributes fattened chickens to the villagers, earning their trust and admiration. What the villagers don't know is that the chickens are no ordinary gifts, they are what you might call cursed. Part 4. The early hours of dawn found Adis and Mazi Ugaku preparing for what felt like their last stand. The village of Obiọha lay in ruins of unity, its people plagued by fear, sickness, and mistrust. Neither knew how much longer they could carry the burden of seeking the truth. Adis, Ugaku began, his voice heavy with exhaustion. The village will not listen. They refuse to see the truth about Chief Uche. What more can we do? Adis stirred the embers of their dying fire, her gaze distant. Sometimes, it is not about being heard, but about doing what must be done. The gods are watching. They will demand justice in their time. Their conversation was interrupted by a loud commotion outside. Uche and a group of villagers were dragging a young boy to the village square. The boy, Ifini, looked terrified, his small frame trembling with fear. He was caught near the shrine. Uche declared. Spying on Chief Uche. He is cursed. The villagers murmured in agreement, their suspicion flaring anew. I am not cursed. Ifini cried, his voice quivering. I heard voices, they told me to follow them. I didn't know it was wrong. Adis stepped forward, raising her staff. Enough. The boy is innocent. Release him. Are we to believe the words of a boy and a woman who consorts with spirits? Uche retorted. Before more could be said, a shadow fell over the square. Chief Uche had arrived, his presence as commanding as ever. He smiled faintly, but his eyes held a dangerous glint. What is the meaning of this uproar? He asked, his voice smooth and controlled. Adis' gaze locked with Chief Uche's. You know well the cause of it, Chief. This village suffers because of your greed. Gasps rippled through the crowd, but Chief Uche merely chuckled. You speak boldly for a woman of your standing, Adis. But boldness is not wisdom. The gods see all, Adis replied evenly. They have shown us your pact with Agidabikno. It is your greed that has cursed this land. His smile faltered briefly before he regained his composure. And yet you offer no proof. Only words. Proof will come, Adis said. And when it does, your wealth will not protect you. The villagers, torn between their loyalty to Chief Uche and their growing fear, began to whisper among themselves. The shrine of Obiọha lay hidden deep within the forest, shrouded by thick foliage that seemed to weave a natural barrier against prying eyes. The air around the shrine was heavy, and an unnatural silence cloaked the area, broken only by the crunch of leaves underfoot as Adis and Mazi Ugaku made their way to its heart. Adis carried a small clay pot filled with consecrated herbs, a sacred mixture that, when burned, would summon the presence of the spirit they sought to expose. Ugaku followed closely, holding a carved wooden talisman to protect himself from harm. Adis, he began hesitantly, his voice barely above a whisper, are we certain this will work? If the spirit is as powerful as you say, won't it retaliate? The herbalist stopped and turned to face him, her expression resolute. Agidabikno thrives on fear, Ugaku. It uses deception to maintain its power. If we do not confront it, this village will fall completely under its shadow. Her words offered little comfort, but Ugaku nodded, swallowing his fear as they reached the shrine. The clearing was dominated by an ancient stone altar, its surface etched with markings that glowed faintly under the moonlight. Adis knelt before the altar, arranging the herbs in a circle and placing the clay pot at its center. She lit a small flame, and a fragrant smoke began to rise, twisting and curling into the air. As Adis chanted, the wind picked up, swirling around them with an unnatural force. The smoke from the herbs thickened, forming shapes that seemed to writhe and shift before solidifying into the towering figure of Agidabikno. Its eyes burned like coals, and its presence radiated an oppressive heat. The spirit's voice was a deep, guttural growl. Who dares summon me? Adis stood her ground, gripping her staff tightly. We seek the truth, Agidabikno. Reveal the one who binds you to this village and curses its people. The spirit laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down Ugaku's spine. You dare demand the truth from me? Truth comes at a cost, mortal. Without warning, the spirit lunged toward Ugaku, its fiery eyes locking onto him. The talisman in his hand began to glow, and he clutched it desperately, reciting the protective incantation Adis had taught him. The spirit recoiled, hissing in anger. "Fools! You think you can defy me? The one you seek is protected by his own lies. Your village will suffer until the last of you falls." With a deafening roar, the spirit vanished, leaving behind an eerie silence. The air around the shrine felt lighter, but both Adis and Ugaku knew that their battle was far from over. The following morning, Adis and Mazi Ugaku presented their findings to the village elders. The blackened talisman from the ritual lay on a wooden table in the elder's hut, pulsating faintly as though still alive. "This talisman," Adis began, her voice steady, "is the key to understanding the curse that plagues Obiọha. It is bound to Chief Uche's wealth, a conduit for the spirit Igbo to feed on the souls of our people." The elders exchanged uneasy glances. The idea that one of their own, especially someone as revered as Chief Uche, could be the cause of their suffering was difficult to accept. "You make a grave accusation, Adis," said Elder Akibuiz, his tone cautious. "Do you have proof beyond this talisman?" Before Adis could respond, Chief Uche entered the hut, his expression calm but his eyes sharp. "What is the meaning of this meeting?" he asked, his voice laced with authority. Adis met his gaze without flinching. "We have uncovered the source of the curse afflicting our village. It is tied to your wealth and your dealings with Igbo. Gasps filled the room, and the elders looked to Chief Uche for a response. He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "This is absurd. My wealth has been a blessing to this village. How dare you accuse me of bringing harm to my people?" "You cannot deny the signs," Ugaku interjected. "The sickness, the dreams, the deaths, they all began after your so-called gifts." The villagers, who had gathered outside the hut, began to whisper among themselves. "Enough!" Chief Uche bellowed, his voice silencing the crowd. "This is nothing more than a ploy to tarnish my name. I demand that these baseless accusations cease immediately." The elders, unwilling to make a decision without more evidence, postponed the matter, leaving Adis and Ugaku frustrated but undeterred. The tension in the village reached a boiling point as Adis and Ugaku worked tirelessly to convince the villagers of Chief Uche's guilt. Their efforts culminated in a final assembly at the village square, where the elders would decide Chief Uche's fate. The square was packed, the air heavy with anticipation. Villagers stood shoulder to shoulder, their faces a mix of fear, doubt, and anger. Ugaku stepped forward, holding the diary and the charred talisman as evidence. His voice carried across the crowd. "This is not about wealth or power. It is about the lives we have lost and the truth we must face. If we continue to accept Chief Uche's gifts, we will all perish." The crowd murmured, some nodding in agreement while others remained skeptical. Chief Uche strode into the square, his head held high. He exuded confidence, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "These accusations are baseless," he declared. "I have given this village everything. Do not let jealousy and lies destroy what we have built together." The villagers hesitated, torn between their loyalty to Chief Uche and their growing fear of the curse. Suddenly, a child in the crowd collapsed, clutching their chest. The villagers gasped, and a woman wailed. "The curse is still here," someone shouted, and chaos erupted. Adis raised her staff, her voice cutting through the noise. "The gods have spoken. Justice will come, one way or another." Chief Uche, sensing the tide turning against him, fled into the night. His once proud figure disappeared into the shadows, leaving the village to grapple with the aftermath of his deceit. In the days that followed, the villagers began to rebuild their lives, leaning on one another for support. The shadow of Chief Uche lingered, but his grip on the village was finally broken. The sun hung low in the sky, casting warm hues over the village square as Mazi Ugaku climbed the wooden stage erected in the heart of Obiọha. It was Christmas morning, but the usual festive air was subdued. The villagers, still reeling from the events of the past months, gathered in silence, their faces etched with grief, confusion, and a longing for clarity. The square, once a hub of vibrant activity, now carried a somber weight. The laughter of children and the joyful exchange of greetings had been replaced by murmured conversations and furtive glances. Chickens clucked nervously in their cages, unclaimed gifts from the recent past, now viewed with suspicion rather than delight. Uche stood on the stage, his frame straightened despite the burdens he had carried for so long. His gaze swept over the crowd, lingering on familiar faces, mothers clutching their children, elders seated with their walking sticks, and young men standing with arms folded, their skepticism evident. Clearing his throat, Uche began, his voice resonant but tempered with humility. My people, today is Christmas, a day that has always been a time of joy, sharing, and unity. But this year, the joy feels distant, does it not? The unity feels strained. A murmur rippled through the crowd, and several heads nodded in quiet agreement. This year has taught us painful lessons, Uche continued. We have seen sickness, death, and suffering. We have seen how greed can twist a man's heart and how the desire for more wealth, more power, can bring destruction not only to oneself but to an entire community. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the crowd. Then, taking a deep breath, he continued with a tone of urgency. Let us speak honestly about the gifts we received from Chief Uche, he said. We all remember the chickens he handed out so generously, do we not? We praised his kindness, celebrated his wealth, and accepted those gifts without question. The villagers exchanged uneasy glances. Some nodded hesitantly, while others avoided Uche's gaze altogether. But what did those gifts cost us? Uche pressed, his voice growing firmer. How many of our loved ones fell ill? How many dreams were haunted by shadows? How many of us ignored the warnings, clinging to the belief that such generosity could come without a price? From the crowd, an elder spoke up, his voice tinged with regret. We thought the chickens were blessings. We never questioned where they came from or why. And that, Uche replied, was our mistake. We allowed ourselves to be blinded by the allure of free things, by the promise of something for nothing. But the truth is, there is no such thing as a gift without strings attached, not when it comes from a place of deceit. Seated near the edge of the stage was Obidi, her presence commanding even in silence. At Uche's gesture, she rose and addressed the crowd. The gods are wise, but they do not intervene where humans refuse to see, Obidi said, her voice calm yet firm. You were warned. The signs were there in your dreams, in your ailments, in your hearts. Yet you chose to ignore them because it was easier to believe in the illusion of generosity than to confront the truth. A young woman in the crowd, clutching a small child, spoke up hesitantly. But what could we have done? We are just villagers. How could we have known the chickens carried a curse? Obidi fixed her with a piercing gaze. It is not about what you knew, it is about what you felt. Did none of you question why the gifts felt too easy? Why wealth that is not earned often comes with a shadow? The woman looked away, and the crowd fell silent again. Uche stepped forward once more, his voice softening as he addressed the villagers. My people, I do not stand here to condemn you. I, too, accepted those chickens. I, too, wanted to believe in the goodness of Chief Uche. But what I have learned, what we all must learn, is this: there is no substitute for hard work, no shortcut to true happiness. We must learn to be content with what we have, to cherish the little we earn with our own hands. A chicken raised in your own backyard may be smaller, but it carries no curse. It fills your belly with pride, not fear. An elder nodded, tapping his walking stick against the ground. True words, Uche. Contentment is wealth that cannot be stolen. And greed, Uche continued, is the gateway to ruin. Look at what Chief Uche became, a man so consumed by the desire for wealth that he was willing to sacrifice his own people. He may have escaped our village, but he will never escape the gods. The crowd murmured in agreement, the truth sinking in like a heavy stone. As the villagers reflected on Uche's words, a boy raised his hand timidly. Does this mean we can never eat chicken again? Laughter rippled through the crowd, lightening the heavy atmosphere. Uche smiled, shaking his head. No, my son. It means we must think about where our chickens, and our blessings, come from. Let this Christmas be a reminder that sometimes, the greatest gifts are not the ones we receive, but the ones we give. The boy grinned, seemingly satisfied, and the villagers began to relax. Conversations started to flow, and the square felt alive once more, albeit in a more subdued way. As the villagers dispersed, their hearts a little lighter and their minds a little clearer, the narrator's voice emerged, a soft echo above the hum of the crowd. After watching this, I know one thing for certain: I will never eat Christmas chicken again without thinking twice. What about you? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. With those words, the tale of Obiọha and its cursed chickens became a parable for anyone willing to listen, a reminder of the dangers of greed, the importance of questioning too good to be true offers, and the enduring value of contentment.